Good evening. I'm Kelda Yoon. It was an emotional day in court as the man accused of deliberately running over a Toronto police officer nearly 3 years ago continued his testimony, tearfully recounting the moment he thought his family was being ambushed by criminals. Umar Zamir has pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder in the death of Detective Constable Jeffrey Northrop. Greg Ross has more on his testimony today.
Umar Zamir told the jury today that he and his family were already in their BMW the first time they noticed a man and a woman rushing towards them. At the time, he says he did not know that the pair were Detective Constable Jeffrey Northrop and Constable Lisa Forbes. They were both wearing shorts. Zamir says he did not know that they were police and he locked his doors. Both officers came to the driver's side window. He says they began banging on the car and telling him to get out. He says he tried to drive forward to get away from them, but at the same moment, a dark-colored van pulled in front of him, blocking his way. Zamir said he did not know that it was an unmarked police van. He said he assumed they were with the man and the woman, saying he thought to himself, "It's not just two people, it's a whole gang." Zamir says he turned to look out the rear window and he put the car in reverse to try and get away from them. He says he saw his 2-year-old son was in the car seat yelling, "Baba, Baba." He said he did not see anyone in front of him, but he admitted there was something that felt like a speed bump as he was driving away. He said he did not know it was a person. Zamir says as he was driving away, he told his wife to call 911, and when he got to the exit of the parking garage, his path was blocked by 2 white cars. Seconds later, he felt the unmarked police van ram him from behind. He says a man with a gun told him to get out of the car. He put Zamir on the ground, cuffed his hands behind his back, and said that he had run over his partner. Zamir told the man that he didn't run over anybody. That's when Zamir says the man first identified himself as police. One of the men pointed to blood on the side of Zamir's car and said, "That's my partner's brains." During his testimony, Zamir said he was horrified when he was told that the officer had died. He said his heart bleeds every time he thinks of Northrop's family. Through tears, he said he's sorry that this happened. Testimony is expected to wrap up tomorrow with 2 Toronto police officers taking the stand. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
The TTC is adopting a new use of force policy for fare inspectors and special constables. The updated policy emphasizing de-escalation. But some advocates have concerns with the language, worried that use of force against fare evaders could still be justified. Lane Harrison has more.
The TTC's new use of force policy is years in the making. It comes 6 years after the transit agency adopted recommendations made by the city's ombudsman, which stemmed from an incident where a black teen was tackled and pinned by fare inspectors. Advocates are worried the new policies, which focus on de-escalation, wouldn't stop that from happening again.
What we don't have clarity on is if I board a streetcar and I don't tap, is someone going to tackle me? Probably not, because I'm white. But what happened to Reese Maxwell Crawford is that he was assaulted by fare inspectors. And that's what this all stems from, right?
TTC Board Chair Jamal Myers says the transit agency does not want to use force to collect fares.
So the policy is pretty distinct in that use of force is not permitted by fare inspectors to collect, stop fare evaders. So the policy does state that. It doesn't state that explicitly, but that is the intent of the policy.
The policy does say, though, that fare inspectors can use force for self-defense, and TTC riders worries that could extend to force being used on an unruly passenger refusing to pay a fare. The group wants to see it stated more explicitly that force will never be used for fare evasion. TTC staff emphasized during the meeting it won't happen.
We always de-escalate. So, it's not permitted for a fare inspector to physically detain a customer.
Fare evasion has become a huge issue for the TTC. Last year, the transit agency says it lost $124 million in revenue because riders weren't paying. The TTC board wants that issue dealt with urgently, but advocates say the transit agency shouldn't be so focused on people dodging fares.
The real fare evader here are higher orders of government. The federal government can definitely pay to fund the TTC.
One thing advocates were glad to see was one amendment to the policy. Councillor Josh Matlow put forward a motion to have race-based data collected anytime force is used on the TTC. He says enforcement agencies have disproportionately subjected racialized people to violence.
That's why we're hearing concerns from some members of the public about what we're doing. And they're worried, they're concerned, and they want to make sure that that doesn't happen at the TTC.
Matlow wants there to be constant monitoring of how the policy is used going forward. Lane Harrison, CBC News, Toronto.
More than 140 Bank of Montreal customers from across the country say they collectively lost more than $1.5 million in fraudulent e-transfers. The group now planning to file a class action lawsuit against the bank. Angelina King looked into how fraudsters access the accounts and ways you can protect yourself.
Hi, my name's Joe Jacobs and I lost $20,000.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Bernas. My husband and I lost money around $63,000.
My name is Emil Landry. I lost $22,470.
My name is Lan Wang. My parents lost $10,000.
And I'm Angelina King. 2 years ago, I first reported on Bank of Montreal customers who lost thousands of dollars after unauthorized e-transfers were sent from their accounts. And since then, I've received more than 24 emails from other BMO customers saying the same thing happened to them.
It's really difficult. One of our kids who we had saved for them to go to university, so they've had to defer it probably for a couple of years.
At 80 years old, that's when you take all your money out, it hurts a lot. So I had to get my son to lend me a few dollars.
Yeah, we were also depressed. That's sleepless night. Like it's hard.
They were on the pension, and this money was basically all their savings.
Several one-off incidents have been reported in the media, all outlining a similar situation, how the money disappeared and why the bank won't reimburse the customers. Now, more than 140 BMO customers have banded together with the plan of filing a class action lawsuit against the bank. One of the organizers says collectively they've lost more than $1.5 million.
So this community is providing folks support. It's empowering them to have a voice, to share their voice. A lot of us have felt ashamed, how could this happen to me? We have people from all walks of life. We have seniors who have never done online banking. We have newly immigrants. We have professionals like doctors, engineers, and we have business owners. And we're all across Canada.
The scenario plays out quite similarly for the BMO customers we spoke to. Out of the blue, they noticed that their accounts had been drained, checking, savings, even lines of credit. Fraudsters somehow logged into their accounts and transferred money to themselves using e-transfer, global money transfers, and setting up payees. But to the bank, it looked like the customers logged in and did the transactions themselves. The bank told them that their passwords were used, one-time codes were sent and entered correctly, and in some cases, even the IP addresses matched. And because of that, the bank wouldn't reimburse them. The customers filed police reports and went to the National Ombudsman, who sided with the bank. Investigators weren't able to catch the fraudsters, and the customers have no idea how their accounts were hacked.
People are so vulnerable to being hacked or to having their security compromised, and yet it's a system that we're essentially forced to have to participate in. And I guess I just feel like the bank has to take a bigger role in providing security for their customers.
In a statement, a BMO spokesperson said the bank is determined to work with government, the tech industry, and other banks to help Canadians defend themselves against these types of scams. Introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about your background.
Kenrick Bagnall. I'm a former law enforcement professional with the Toronto Police Service. My last 8.5 years were specifically working at Intelligence Services in the Coordinated Cyber Center, which is the agency's cybercrime unit. I spent 12 years of my career in Bermuda, where I worked for a bank for 4 years, building out their network infrastructure and securing it.
How did this happen? How are these people getting into their accounts?
Yeah, a lot of this is happening using malware, infecting the victim's computer with malware. And what that malware did was that it harvested all the credentials. So anything that you had saved in terms of your convenience card account for logging into your banking, your password, your IP address, so everything about your computer environment, so it could be your computer, your tablet, even a mobile phone. What the malware would then do is that it would bundle all of that into a package. It would send it off to the dark market, and then the dark market proprietors would then sell it off to hackers.
How much are they selling it for?
So we're talking a range that could be anywhere from maybe $50 to $200. It really does depend, because there are a lot of variables. Some of the things that are being sold here are exactly that. Here's a compromised driver's license. Here's another document. It's a Canadian driver's license for British Columbia. They're now logging into the banking infrastructure. And as far as the bank systems are concerned, because these are harvested credentials from the victim, it actually looks like the victim is logging in themselves. So as far as the checks and balances and controls and the reasonable effort that the bank is putting in from a security perspective, they're doing the right things.
Even if their devices were compromised, the customers say BMO should have reduced the risk of that leading to their money being stolen. And they say the bank should have flagged irregular and suspicious activity, stopped it, and alerted them.
I've never made a global money transfer ever in my 25 years that I've been with BMO. So after the first money transfer, why did they not stop it and question it instead of letting all four go through and empty the accounts?
BMO says it focuses on detecting and preventing these types of situations from happening, and that its systems are continuously adapted to try and help protect customers, but it can't share details for security reasons. The spokesperson said customers can sign up for alerts if the bank detects unusual activity. BMO said these types of scams are becoming more sophisticated and called them a public safety threat to Canadians. This type of fraud is becoming a bigger problem in general. The Ombudsman for Banking Services and Investments, or the OBSI, says in the last 3 years, e-transfer fraud has become increasingly concerning, reaching historic levels. In 2021, the OBSI opened 46 cases of e- and wire transfer fraud, making up 9% of all of its cases. The next year saw a jump to 117 cases, 17%. And last year, 664 cases were opened, making up more than a quarter of all cases. And just a little note, these numbers don't represent all Canadian banks. And the OBSI says that large increase of cases between 2022 and last year is partly because of changes to the Bank Act. The OBSI says in most of these types of cases, it can't recommend that the bank compensate customers because its investigation finds that customers unknowingly gave away their personal information and that the bank complied with all of its obligations. But some experts and consumer advocates say customers shouldn't be held liable if their devices were hacked. They say banks pushed customers to online banking, and so it's the bank's responsibility to maintain secure systems. Plus, they say it's just not reasonable for consumers to be aware of all of the online vulnerabilities.
The current system is a blame the victim system, as opposed to blame the institution that's responsible for setting up online banking and maintaining it and failing to maintain it in a way that ensures it's safe. And one key change they could easily make is to set up with every customer a dollar amount above which the customer is not comfortable having a withdrawal happen, and there would have to be a full check before any transaction could go through.
I asked the Canadian Bankers Association, which represents Canada's largest banks, about whether the bank should be held liable. A spokesperson didn't answer my question directly, but said the organization works with banks to try and raise awareness about these types of scams and how to prevent them.
So from a targeting perspective, what cybercriminals will often do is that they'll use open source information, particularly in social media. And you can see with this one particular individual here, where they live, where they went to school, who they work for, and people often reveal a lot about themselves in the photos. Concerts that they have gone to, example here as well, there's photos of vehicles. So from the basic information, just looking at it for a few minutes, there's enough here to craft a very, very targeted, very, very sophisticated phishing email. If they click on this, they might get a discount to the next concert, or they might get a preview of the 2025 version of this vehicle before it's released. And ultimately, the user is the ultimate line of defense in terms of their awareness and detection and looking at something that is out of the norm for them. This website doesn't look quite the same. This link is to something I've never seen before. It's really slowing down and being hypersensitive to what you're looking at and questioning it.
Does having a strong password help when someone is selling all my information that includes my strong password?
Well, in a lot of cases, passwords are encrypted. So passwords are usually decrypted from a criminal perspective using a technique called brute force. So if I have a 4 or 5 or 6 letter password, it can be brute forced pretty easily, only because it's so small. The strength of a password is really in the length of the password. So this is security.org, and what it does, it gives you the opportunity to see how strong your password is. It's going to be based on the processing power of this particular computer. If it was on a computer with more or less horsepower, you would see a different number. I will show you an example really quickly. I will type in password 123. It would take this computer 1 month to crack that password, which is, if it was important enough to the cyber criminal, they'll have a computer sitting off to the side and they would just let that run for 30 days until that password was cracked.
Can I put mine in and we'll see?
I would suggest that you have a pretty strong password.
I'm proud of that.
Because look how long it's going to take. Now, you would either have a cyber criminal with a very, very powerful supercomputer or a lot of patience.
I was nervous. This is like a relief.
Were you nervous typing
nervous,
that?
Yeah.
Right, and you'll see that even, I don't know what the password is because I can't see it. Now, if you add a couple special characters to this, like an exclamation mark.
Oh, wow.
And that was just one character I added. You see what it changes to.
Right.
So the length is really what makes the password.
Many of the customers I spoke with say since they joined the group, their hope has been renewed that they might be able to get their money back.
We all want our money back, right? But because we're dealing with a giant, we're just, David, Goliath.
But if not, at the very least, they hope sharing their experience leads to better bank security and helps prevent others from being hacked. Angelina King, CBC News, Toronto.
You are looking at a live shot of Toronto. On and off rain this evening, as it was for most of the day. Currently sitting at 14 degrees in the city. Colette Kennedy joins us now with a look at your forecast. And Colette, definitely a soggy one out there today.
Yeah, Kelda, I find some people can find April a little bit of a difficult month, just in that we're so close to getting to that warmer weather and the sunshine, but it's a wet month and it has these ups and downs. And yeah, we're into some of the, I don't know if it's necessarily down, but the wet weather and windy conditions as well. We still have more to come from this system. It's a very juicy system here. We're going to find tomorrow late in the day, things cool down as well. So we could even see some mixing or well north of the city, maybe even a little bit of light accumulation of some snowfall there, and some weekend improvement. What do I mean by that? Well, the sun will come out at times, but there's still a chance of showers as we go through both days. So we'll get more detail on that coming up. Rainfall warnings to the north, special weather statements, though, through a large area here because of the amount of rain, 25 to 40 millimeters, and in some cases, closer to 50, especially where we get a few embedded thunderstorms. So the daytime highs from today, in many cases, actually the temperatures are still at that or near that because they're nearly steady through the early part of the overnight. And then we'll see the temperatures falling tomorrow afternoon. It'll happen earlier than that in southwestern Ontario as we get on the backside of the system. But you see just how much rainfall is associated with it keeps rotating around counterclockwise around that area of low pressure, and then we start to see the mixing to the north of us. So even on Friday into the evening hours, still a band of heavier rain coming back into southwestern Ontario. And then that moisture meets with that cooler air, and as it does, that's where we get into some of that mix that could even linger into early on Saturday. It should stay north of Toronto, at least the city, you know, as you get north of the 407 or in the higher elevations, that'll be a different story. Now, Saturday, looking good southwestern Ontario, and eventually that clearing line will come through the GTA. It's going to take longer, but the rest of the eastern sections in eastern Ontario, that will be a little trying with some of that cloud cover, and then yet another system is going to rotate through on Sunday with some more showers or thunderstorms. The winds, yes, we have some strong winds, but nothing like they're going to get as we go through tomorrow. So some really strong wind gusts exceeding even 60 kilometers an hour at times, especially later in the day tomorrow. Be aware of that. Those rainfall amounts, this is additional rainfall, okay, coming up to that 30 millimeters or so. I've been saying those temperatures staying nearly steady here, so not a big change in those through the overnight period. And then there we go as we head through the weekend. Those are near seasonal temperatures, and then things improve further as we get to the beginning of next week.
It was a chilling crime, a daughter orchestrating the murder of her parents. The murder for hire plot playing out in their quiet suburban home in Markham. 15 years later, that crime and the woman behind it is the subject of a documentary that just debuted at #1 on Netflix. What Jennifer Did explores the story of Jennifer Pan and what led her to do the unthinkable. The CBC's Dwight Drummond spoke to the producers of the new doc. Here's an excerpt.
Some people broke into our house and they showed us all his money.
It's the craziest story I've ever covered, I've ever heard of. The fact that it's true, you know, I would say it's wilder than fiction. You know, it's a Hollywood script.
Wow.
But you know, we always have to remember that it's a tragedy and it's a murder.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. And we hear directly from Jennifer in the documentary through the police interviews.
My mom screamed. I yelled out for her.
The interrogation techniques play a big part of this story, and that's what we hear the most. We hear her in her own voice saying what happened that night. One thing I found interesting, and I don't want to give too much away because it's in the doc, but they kind of lie to her to trick her into telling the truth. What did you think about that as a former crime reporter, about that part of the interrogation
It's really
process?
interesting.
Good,
because that's the Reed technique. It's actually got its own name.
Really?
It's got its own counsel. Police are allowed to lie to you.
Because if you are lying, it's the most cold-blooded thing that I have ever faced in my life.
To watch the full interview, you can head to our website or the CBC Toronto YouTube page. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Have a great night.